Good afternoon and welcome to the Hispanic Association on Corporate Responsibility's July webinar, Corporate Philanthropy, Aligning Community Investments with Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Goals. My name is Sylvia Perez-Cash and I'm the SVP of Operations at ACER. Thank you for joining us today. Today's conversation offers insights into the interplay between corporate philanthropy investments and efforts to prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives within a company. Our esteemed speakers are joining us to offer their perspective on how the integration of DE&I into corporate philanthropy efforts impacts not just strategy, but also community engagement, employee engagement, partnerships, and operations. Needless to say, I'm eager to dive into today's conversation. Corporate philanthropy is one of ACER's 4 pillars for measuring a company's progress towards Hispanic inclusion. Before we get started, I'd like to thank today's sponsors for our webinar. The first sponsor is AT&T.
A lot of people say, I'll believe it when I see it. But I'll tell you what, they got it backwards. Because there are certain things in life you can only see when you first believe. So in cities around the country, we're putting belief into action. We take pride in getting our hands dirty, see potential where others won't, and build something from nothing, knowing we are the ones who will create who we become. After all, when you have faith, grit and determination will always find a way, because we are believers.
Thank you, AT&T, for being a longtime supporter of ACER and Hispanic inclusion. Now, I'd like to introduce our second sponsor of today's webinar, Ford Motor Company.
As the philanthropic arm of Ford Motor Company, Ford Fund has been supporting communities at a grassroots level for more than 70 years by harnessing the power and expertise of the Ford Motor Company network, our employees, dealers, and nonprofit partners. We help build a better world where every person is free to move and pursue their dreams. Together, we provide access to essential needs and services to build equity and help individuals, families, and communities succeed. We develop programs that remove barriers to economic success and provide resources that allow people to thrive, not just survive. And by using the power of mobility, we create unique solutions to social and economic challenges in communities in our own backyard and beyond. After all, we believe freedom of movement should not be reserved for those who can afford it, but available for all to pursue their own path. Ford Fund, keeping the road to a better future open to all who dream of moving forward.
Thank you, Ford Motor Company, for your partnership with ACER and the Hispanic community. And finally, I'd like to introduce our third sponsor of today's webinar, Wells Fargo.
Since 1852, Latinos have been Wells Fargo customers and team members. Today, Latinos are powering U.S. economic growth, and our commitment to empowering this community is stronger than ever. You have a dream? We want to help. You have an idea? Let's get to work. Wells Fargo provides the resources and advocacy that helped create a level playing field for all. As the top mortgage lender to Hispanics, in 2015, we pledged $125 billion for Hispanic homebuyers through 2025. We help Hispanic business owners build credit and gain access to capital. We empower Latino youth as a partner of the Hispanic Scholarship Fund by providing more than $24 million in scholarship support since 2003. We champion our diverse team with equitable pay and career development programs. We see difference as opportunity, culture as talent, and every person as an agent for positive change. Wells Fargo remains committed to meeting the financial needs of our customers and empowering Latino wealth for generations to come.
Thank you, Wells Fargo, for all that you do with the Hispanic community. At ACER, we look forward to working with AT&T, Ford Motor Company, and Wells Fargo throughout the year. Our moderator for today's conversation is Sandy Holt. Sandy is the Chief Development and Marketing Officer for the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, HACU. Haku, as a member of the Hacer Board of Directors, has and continues to play a leadership role in supporting Hacer's mission and advocating for Hispanic inclusion within leadership pipelines, supply chains, corporate governance, and philanthropic investments. We are thrilled Sandy could join us today. Sandy, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so very much, Sylvia. I really appreciate it. And thank you to Hacer for the invitation to be here. On behalf of Hacer's board, bienvenidos. Good afternoon to all of our participants that are celebrating with us on this wonderful session and attending. We are appreciative of your participation. At this time, we're going to get started with the corporate philanthropy, aligning community investments. And I would like to take the time now to introduce our expert panelists that are with us today. We'll go ahead and get started with Celeste Carrasco from AT&T so that she can give us a brief introduction about herself and her work at AT&T.
Thank you, Sandy, and good afternoon and good morning to some of you. My name is Celeste Carrasco. I'm a Director of Public Affairs at AT&T. I work out of the DC office. My primary role within the company is to build, maintain, and support amazing organizations such as Hacer and Haku as well. So thank you for having me today. I look forward to this conversation.
Gracias, Celeste. At this time, we would like for Joe Avila to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about himself.
Hey, hello, everyone. So proud and happy to be here representing Ford. I'm Joe Avila. I oversee community development and impact programs at the Ford Motor Company Fund, the philanthropic arm of Ford Motor Company. So we actually work on different social impact initiatives. I lead initiatives in the US and Latin America. So I'm really looking forward to discussion with my fellow panelists.
Gracias, Joe. At this time, we'd like to introduce Ruben Barrales, perdón. Ruben, I think you might be on mute.
And that's all I have to say. Thanks so much, Sandy. Thank you, Sandy. Great to be on with this panel of folks that know how to unmute themselves. And with everyone that's watching, Hacer is fantastic organization. I am just so much enjoying working for Wells Fargo in a role that's focused on diversity and inclusion. So looking to hear from my colleagues in terms of their best practices and hoping to share what we're doing so that we can all move our community forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Ruben. We really appreciate that. And we're looking forward to hearing what all three of our panelists have to share today. During the webinar, you're going to learn how using social justice framework for investment strategies can improve employee satisfaction, increase brand visibility, and maintain a loyal customer base. We'll also explore how philanthropy that works to close the digital divide in Latinx communities, made even more obvious during the COVID-19 pandemic, can provide equal access to job opportunities and tap into Latinx talent pools, as well as initiatives throughout the corporate pipeline that improve diversity from supplier to executive. We're going to be talking about strategy and management. We're going to be talking about community engagement, employee engagement, measurement, and operations. So having said that, we're going to get started with the first of our questions for our panelists. And this question is going to be directed to both Joe and Ruben. The Association of Corporate Citizenship Professionals, Rocket Social Impact, recently came out with a study that showed that 79% of corporate foundations who participated in the study survey had deepened the integration of their corporate social responsibility strategy with the company's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. Has your corporate social responsibility strategy undergone a similar transition? And if so, please describe how your strategy has changed in direct response to the events of 2020. So who wants to go first, Joe or Ruben?
Go ahead, Joe.
Well, thank you, Ruben, and thanks again for the opportunity to us there. We also has been long-standing partners, and we're really proud of all the work that Acer is doing. This is a great question, and I think we need to look at things from the perspective how we are all evolving, right? Are we evolving in the right direction to build a better world? And that's what we do that for, really. We have been supporting communities, as you saw in the video, for more than 70 years. But we are always looking to evolve, not only through, our products. You have seen the electrification and evolution of our top leading brands like Mustang, F-150, Lighting, Bronco, etc. But through how we operate from the CSR and corporate philanthropy perspective with equity on top of mind. So giving back to the community, is part of our DNA, but that evolution have to take place accordingly to company values and what is happening in the environment, right? Our founder was a visionary in terms of how he went to do business, and dating back when he actually created the $5 a day wage and growth of the middle class. He was talking about CSR and equity. And that sentiment and that legacy is with us today at the Ford Fund and Ford Motor Company. It's obvious that last year, it was a challenging year for everybody. And in our case, for 2 months, we have all our plants around the world totally closed. And we sit back and reflect, okay, how can we still drive impact? I mean, we're not producing vehicles, we're not producing cars. So we adapted and we listened to our partners to produce more than 100 million masks that were delivered in our communities to support COVID relief efforts, right? At the same time, we did convene with what we call our Ford Multicultural Advisory Committee to actually rethink our plan, rethink our strategy. Okay, we're going through this crisis. What can we do together to still provide equity and provide access to those who are the most vulnerable, the traditional excluded groups? And then how we actually went beyond to align even further our CSR, our corporate philanthropy plans in terms of including diversity, equity, and inclusion, but more than what we used to do in the past. Of course, what happened last year with Mr. Floyd was devastating, but was also at the same time a wake-up call, right, for a lot of corporations. The good news in terms of Ford and many of the corporations that we work with and our partners, we were really doing great work in terms of multicultural, but this actually is accelerating what we do. And we're basically, trying to not only adapt, but also react. But most importantly, through this Multicultural Advisory Committee, we're looking at trends, 5-10 years from now. What are we going to be facing? What are the issues that we see today that is not only is going to make a drastic impact if we don't do anything in our communities, but also in our companies? Because at the end of the day, we could be producing the best cars and trucks in the world, but if we don't have a strong communities, what is really the point? And going back to the legacy from Henry Ford, that famous phrase that he says, a business that does nothing but money is a poor business, is very much with us today.
Well, those are really good points. And it's great to see what Ford is doing over at Wells Fargo in terms of the integration of corporate social responsibility and DE&I. We actually reorganized, created a new group of which I am a part, proud to be a part of our new, what we call Diverse Segments Representation and Inclusion Group, which reports directly to the CEO, which is enterprise-wide, and it incorporates what our foundation has been doing. Our foundation is still up and running, but we've taken the pillars of our foundation at Wells Fargo Foundation. We're focused on financial health, housing affordability, small business growth. So we've taken those plus added educational opportunities and social justice and wrapped them around with a DE&I lens. And that's the focus of this new enterprise-wide group at Wells Fargo. So all of the engagement that we enter into with partners, external partners, is going to be focused on those pillars with an emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as a matter of fact, in terms of further integration, some of the partnerships that our foundation was managing, we are now managing, again, especially with those groups that have a particular focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, like ASER, for example, and other great organizations around the country.
Thank you so very much, Joe and Ruben, for those insights. You definitely have also described the power of and between corporate social responsibility and diversity, equity, and inclusion, how it affects your people and your cultures on your team. So we're very grateful for that. The next question is for Celeste. Historically, corporate social responsibility and diversity, equity, and inclusion and HR have been considered two very different functions, okay? So do you see that particular structure evolving in the future? Why or why not?
So yeah, thanks for that question, Sandy. It's one of those things that is going to depend on each corporation. The size of the corporation is also going to influence as to how these how these organizational buckets are going to be aligned. But within my world, within AT&T, one of the things that I am seeing is that these conversations are not unique to one silo. I think the businesses are realizing that it's an important component of their internal priorities as well. So one of the things that I am seeing is that, putting the burden on HR or D&I to be the sole responsibility carrier for diversity, equity, and inclusion doesn't serve the business as a whole. And that's just my opinion. I think that as we operate as a company, we need to realize that has to exist in all areas of our businesses. So whether it's customer service, whether it's HR, whether it's philanthropy, manufacture, it doesn't matter. It just has to be part of the fabric of who we are and what we do. And that's why I think we're going to see it spread wide versus just aligning.
That's music to my ears to hear what Celeste is talking about. I think, again, the model at Wells Fargo is we have an enterprise-wide function, which is not just regulated or relegated to HR. It's enterprise-wide. So as Celeste mentioned, all the functions, all the lines of business have responsibility and accountability for DE&I.
It's really interesting to hear you speak of this. My background is in higher education, and I do work for Haku. And enrollment management in the 80s was very similar to what I'm seeing coming through with diversity, equity, inclusion, and being very holistic and strategic approaches. Enrollment management was the same way. It's everyone's responsibility to take care of the students and all our guests and each other. And it's from the top all the way to the bottom, everyone is important in the process. So it's really interesting to hear you all share these strategies and what your companies are doing to really accelerate and really become very inclusive and holistic in your approaches. So for Joe and all of you who would like to jump in, for companies who have perhaps not made that intentional effort to align their corporate social responsibility with their diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies, but they want to, what would you offer them as possible suggested first steps in developing an approach that fits their particular culture, priorities, and resources of that company? So we'll get started with Joe, and then Celeste and Ruben, if y'all want to chime in, feel free to do so.
Yeah, thank you again for that question. And, this is actually close related to what Celeste was describing before, right? We're also seeing, that it's more relevant not only for the community, for our employees, for the company, in everything where, diversity, equity, inclusion is bringing value in every function, in everything we do, from designing a vehicle in our case, and all the way that we sell it through our dealers, or the way that we go about to market or in our communities. So leveraging, philanthropy and corporate social responsibility, and being sure that equity is on top of it's at the center of the plan and the strategy, not only create influence, engage employees, and drive a meaningful change, but it's critical for the success of the enterprise, as not only because it's the right thing to do, but it's because companies today, more than ever before, are judged on the basis of their treatment of employees, customers, and the way that they go to market, the way that they think their strategies, and of course, the way that we embrace diversity. So for those corporations that probably, have not made that an intentional effort, I think they need to look at who are the best in class in their own industries, right? Or who are those long-lasting brands. And I think here we have three great examples. AT&T, Wells Fargo, and Ford are companies that has been around, for many, many years, more than 100 years for sure, each one of us. And so if we really are building brands and corporations, not only to be good corporate citizens, but they're built to last, like that famous book, we need to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion and make it part of our strategies or our plans. So how we do that? Well, there are different ways, like Ruben was describing. Wells Fargo has that strategy and that committee. We actually, because of all the events that happened last year, we also, at Ford, we created a committee that elevated everything that is directed from the top, our CEO now, with every function. But if there is a corporation that don't have the resources, well, as peers, as other corporations that are probably look at them and see what they're doing and trying to emulate some of the best practices. The best way is to bring together teams from different backgrounds, diverse groups, and ideate and lead that innovation to build a better business for whatever purpose you're trying to produce.
Yeah, and I can add to what Joe was saying. I think there was a time when D&I was kind of seen as an optional thing that corporations may or may not undertake, whether it was cultural, whether it was just a matter of resources availability. And, I think there were, in past conversations, I used to hear things like, yeah, my company is not so focused around D&I, and they would just focus on what I would consider to be compliance, right? As long as they were compliant within the law and they weren't, they didn't have any discriminatory practices, and they were satisfied with the way that they were operating. But I don't think that's enough anymore. I think society has evolved. I think employees have evolved, and the corporations are going to be left behind if their approaches to DEI are not evolving as well. And it's creating, and I think it was in the description of this panel, it is a competitive advantage, because I think future employees, the next generation, are not, this is part of the profile of the company that they look at. They want to know how involved these organizations are within the DEI space. They want to know what they've done for social justice. They want to know what they have done to elevate LGBTQ rights, or what kind of benefits they provide outside of what's required by the law. The next generation of our employees have very high standards that go beyond what we currently understand to be the bare minimum, right? It's like they're not settling. And I think that's important for corporations, big and small, to understand today, or they're going to be left without a pool of talented employees in the future, because these employees are just going to choose differently. And I think that's a key for them to know. So I don't know if I answered exactly, but I just wanted to kind of say this is one of the reasons why you should, if you haven't. And I think Joe did a really great job of covering what you can do in order to engage. And I'm sure Ruben has great stuff that he can add.
Well, don't build up expectations, but I do want to say that it's a fight for talent, and as both Joe and Celeste have said, our employees really are looking for leadership, and they're able to vote with their feet, and our customers vote with their dollars. So, but it's not inevitable, and we do need corporate leaders who do embrace diversity and inclusion and actually make it a part of the organization, and not, again, siloed into philanthropy or HR and just part, but actually integrate it throughout the organization. And there's fantastic diverse talent, and we need to identify it and grow it in corporate America.
Absolutely. And I'm hearing intentionality, and there's going to be a demand from employees of the future that will have that expectation. So you guys are well ahead of the ball game there. And I just want to put in a plug for a set symposium every year for those in the audience who would like to participate in the symposium. It would give you an opportunity to learn about other companies and what they are doing also, and what suggestions they might be able to provide you in what they are doing in order to really elevate this important topic, and how you can bring both corporate social responsibility together along with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So my next question is, I would like to know if you have any examples of how your company connects to the Latinx communities through your corporate social responsibility initiatives and investments. And I'll go ahead and start with Joe, and then Celeste and Ruben can share some examples from their team.
I'll let Celeste start. I know he's doing great stuff. Is that okay, Celeste?
Wait, I'll
go after you.
Fine. That's fine, but I think Ruben has been writing our coattails for the last two questions.
Okay.
So you go, Ruben.
I've just been agreeing with them. Hey, so one thing I want to mention, I see that in the comments section, Alejandra and Luis both asked questions about more specificity or what kind of lenses we use, and I want to take this opportunity to answer your question through, and hopefully theirs too. So at Wells Fargo, so one specific example and a lens that we're using, say our philanthropic arm, which Wells Fargo is one of the largest corporate foundations in the country. During the pandemic, most people are familiar with the PPP program, which provided grants-based loans that turned into grants to small businesses. So we took PPP funds that were generated. We said we weren't going to take any of those dollars at all. We were going to give them back to the community. So we basically took $400 million in those fees. And I do want to say Wells Fargo was the first bank to say we were going to use those philanthropically. And we invested in what we called our Open for Business Fund. And here's where the lens comes in with DE&I, focused on diverse small businesses. So we basically have been working over this last year in terms of identifying CDFIs, which are community development financial institutions that give loans in low, moderate income communities and diverse communities, giving technical assistance grants to diverse-led organizations that help small businesses with their capacity. And we're looking at another round of funding that's going to be focused on resilience. So that's an example of where we take something that we've done before, philanthropy, and we put a DE&I lens on it and say we're going to focus on diverse small businesses and make sure that we're providing the resources they need to prosper during these times.
All right, so you did great. See? So from I read the questions and I appreciate the engagement for sure. So I'm going to be very specific about the E in DEI, which is that equity conversation. Um, at AT&T we have the AT&T Foundation that partners with organizations year in and year out, that we support, for millions of dollars into philanthropy. But as it came to this conversation during COVID, um, we did support around COVID relief. But the one that I want to mention for this particular conversation is the whole equity part of it. Is what has transpired during 2020 around, for example, the Black Lives Matter and Stop Asian Hate and all the LGBT transgender bathroom bills, for example. Those are very, and DACA, of course, for our, for the Latino, it has been a primary point for us as well. So these are four examples across four of the segments that I work with, that where advocacy internally, this is where the roles that these gentlemen and myself have at these corporations, is where we get to sit at the table and explain to the corporation, not that they need much explaining, they get it, trust me. But it's like that advocacy that says we need to get involved. We need to make sure that, we are at the tip of this spear to make sure that we are, leading the charge for these conversations. We are supporting financially these organizations that may be doing, litigation around a lot of these things. A lot of these things cost a lot of money because it needs to be litigated. So, in our particular, to be fair on these specifics, feel free to, Google AT&T and then, Stop Asian Hate, and you will see the organizations that AT&T has funded to make sure that these organizations have the funds needed to be able to support these campaigns. And, around BLM, we've done the same thing. And, for DACA, I mean, this is, as of Friday, we have a whole new docket of things that we are going to need to work around. But we have been front and center, whether it's AT&T individually or as part of a coalition that supports immigration reform and also a permanent solution for DACA. The business community can't draw the line at social justice and say that's as far as we're going to go. These are our families, these are our customers, these are our stockholders, and it affects everyone. So it is part of our conversation. It is part of who we are. It's part of our fabric. And it's better for us to become part of the conversation so that we can move this ball forward versus us pretending like we are not a part of it, like it doesn't affect us, right? So hopefully that helps to address some of the questions that were posed. And with that, Joe, if you have anything to add, thank you.
No, I think the two of you have covered it very well. But on the equity portion, I don't think we can insist, ever enough on how important that we really look this in a totally different, much deeper way than we ever have done before, right? In terms of, for example, what we have done in the Hispanic community and Latino community, you can go to forefront.org. There is great data there that you can see. We have been investing in the Hispanic community for quite a long time. We have been corporate founders of different programs, including programs with ASER. But when it comes to, did I lose you guys? Oh, hold on. Oh, you're here. Okay. So when it comes to really driving equity, how the only thing I'm going to say is just this, how we break that cycle, how we can help to break the cycle where the traditional and historical unattended groups and communities can actually start to receive those opportunities, how we're going to provide them access to resources so we can break the cycle where, I was reading some statistics the other day, and if a child, and I believe, I want to be sure, let me, if a child is born in the low, uh, um, from the social mobility perspective, 70% of children raised in the bottom fifth would remain below the middle of the income ladder as adults. And 43% of Americans born in the bottom quintile remain there as adults. Only 4% of Americans born in the bottom actually make it to the very top. So how we change that? And the only way that we can do it is through equity. How we provide access to resources for these traditional, historically unattended groups so we can break the cycle.
Absolutely. And I would add education to that as well. We need to educate more of our youth so that they can become wonderful, productive citizens working at your wonderful companies. So having said that, the events of 2020 did prompt many companies to establish new community partnerships to support changed investment and impact strategies. So how does your company approach relationship building with new community partners? If you could all, share a little bit about how your company does that, would be great.
Sure, I'll go first. Because I think I already kind of touched on it on my last comment around some of these social movements. And I think, the foundation under, let me put quotations, normal circumstances, they had they had a process in which they did, open for grants, and, you had to have certain programs that qualified with our mission. But this particular situation, I think, we weren't the only foundation that kind of like we were like, oh, what's going on, right? How can we help? And you have to kind of like create a space to be able to support catastrophic events in the same way that, our foundation supports catastrophic events that are weather related, right? They're unexpected. You support the rebuild, and I know Joe is shaking his head because he's I know that he does a lot of work around catastrophic events. AT&T does a lot of, we are usually we have a response team that is usually the first one in addition to FEMA, because they kind of need telecommunications in order to be able to function and to rebuild. So, we had to respond to this as a catastrophic event. This is a catastrophic event. It still is. The rebuilding is still a part of it. So, partnerships sometimes have to be a little bit more organic. People that do really good work that may not have been an established, partner. I'll give you the perfect example that we all love because I personally love him, is like Jose Andres, right? Like, he's a great example of a non-traditional partner, right? But he's doing such an amazing job in helping communities that you cannot help but to say, I'm going to partner with him and support his efforts because he's doing the right thing for the communities and for those who are affected. So I think that's a very unique space, in particular dealing with events that are unpredictable.
Yeah, to touch a little bit more on that, I think part of the approach, and I agree with what Celeste has been doing. We need to see this in like this is a disaster immediate response that we need to all get together and implement. So how you do in those cases? I remember AT&T and Ford were one of the first companies in the ground after Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, and we were there talking to our community partners, talking to the experts, talking to scientists, talking, and see how we could do beyond just making a donation. Because there's nothing wrong with that. It's important. We have to make donations to people like American Red Cross, Salvation Army, because they are the ones that get to the ground first before anybody else can have access to that. But then in this case, how we embrace nonprofits, organizations, government, and leverage every resource that we have within our corporations to tackle, this equity issue, this diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we need to remember that one size doesn't fit all. So the way that we approach things probably in Texas is very different than New York or California or San Francisco. But we have to have that national approach and then a national strategy, and then take it to the local level, adapt, so we're able to replicate in everything that we do. Because at the end of the day, like we were talking before, if corporations don't embrace this the right way and with that sense of urgency, they're going to start to fall behind, and it doesn't matter the history, for example, in the case of Ford, we have been investing, in our community for more than close to 50 years, and yes, that was great. That was the base for everything that we're doing today. But how we evolve is with more equity, and I keep saying and insist how we break that cycle. So we provide resources, and when I mean resources, is everything that goes from essential services through education, through a career path, or even job training, how we prepare the next generation for the jobs of the future. 50% of the jobs that are going to be around 10 years from now, they don't exist today. So how we're going to help our next generation to be ready for that, and especially those that has been historically not being represented or attended.
Hey, Sandy, that's a great question on new partnerships, which is tough. I mean, you combine all of our foundation and philanthropic support, and we're not going to be able to satisfy the need, that's out there, and the number of organizations and potential partners. For us, we're looking for partners that can help us on our DE&I journey in terms of internally what we're doing with our employees, and in terms of the communities that we're working with. Something that's really important and really tough, and I think some of the questions relate to this, is the metrics around it. So I'm looking for organizations that can help us determine, are we moving the needle forward? So there's no drought of organizations that are serving our communities, the Latino community, for example, but we're looking for alignment where they're helping small businesses actually grow, helping get Latino families into homes, helping Latinos with financial education, those kinds of things. So the challenge comes into the metrics and being able to measure that.
Absolutely. You're all correct. There are so many needs out there, but you all have a responsibility to your corporation also, and what your priorities for your corporation are as well as helping the communities. And you are all doing a great job. We appreciate everything that you're doing in our communities, and also in Puerto Rico, especially during the hurricanes when they were hit. I know AT&T and I know Joe Avila and Ford were there, really helping a lot of the families that were really affected. So let's go ahead and switch a little bit now to employee engagement. So as investment strategies are integrated with your internal DEI policies and initiatives, what do you see as opportunities for your employees to be engaged in corporate social responsibility efforts? We'll start with Ruben.
Oh, I always start. So for us, again, with our reorganization and the focus on DE&I, we have started what we call diverse segments executive forums. We've identified leaders and emerging leaders within each of the different segments: Black, African American, Latino, Asian, and we're going to basically go through all the segments you can imagine. And we're creating these forums. Our CEO, Charlie Scharf, meets with the groups every month. We have work streams related to internal hiring practices, to external partnerships, for example, and those team members have a say, and we're working through our list of the recommendations that they're making, and we're accomplishing those. And it's going to take some time. I saw one of the questions, what's the timeline here? It's ever evolving. It's corporate America, so it's lower than it should be probably. But we'll feel good about the progress that we're making, and we're holding ourselves accountable in terms of this. And one of the things I want to mention in terms of holding ourselves accountable, we have changed our compensation system so that diversity and equity are part of the compensation. The goals, diverse goals, have to be met by senior leaders. And it's not just an overall diversity goal. It's, again, disaggregated by segment. So we're going to look at numbers of team members in the African American, Latino, Asian Pacific Islander, for example. And so I don't think anything motivates leaders as much as compensation. And when you tie and make DE&I a part of it, it's going to change the culture over time of the organization.
That's great intentionality.
I'm happy to chime in. I mean, at AT&T, employees resource groups, employee groups have been around for decades. So, we have an advantage that we have fared through history as to, on the social engagement and making sure that, our employees are actively engaged in everything that we do. And I think the most important piece, ERGs bring a lot of value to the business, but during these times, ERGs bring counsel that may not be available immediately under different circumstances. And I saw Tiffany's question that she said, timelines and things like that. And it works both ways, because sometimes to get employee engagement, it takes a lot of orchestrating in order for that information to flow right back up the pipeline. You get it and then it goes back up. By the time it actually reaches the decision-making tree, it may have already passed. So one of the beautiful things about ERGs is the immediate engagement of employees that a corporation can leverage. And during these times, you're able to have a fireside chat with your employees, and honest, you already have a trusted source of information right at your fingertips. So, in an environment in which time can be of the essence, this is a very valuable thing to have. So I'm just adding to what Ruben just said. It's just incredibly valuable to have employees be engaged.
Absolutely. And your own employees are your customers and your built-in focus groups too. So great point, Celeste.
Yeah, I want to say something really quickly to add also. And it's not only the opportunity to leverage them and the ERG and the different employee groups you have, but internally, but also externally. Employees wants to be in the action also, especially in alignment with CSR and corporate philanthropy efforts. So how you actually leverage the expertise from those resource employee groups in a way, for example, you have
I think
you froze
programs.
a little.
Can you hear me now? So how
Yes,
they're part of your corporate philanthropy program, STEM labs that you are executing. So at Ford, we actually has been focused on leveraging the expertise of our Ford employees through the different ERGs, depending on the program, depending on the situation, because that's a untapped resource that decades before we never actually went to that from that perspective. Now we not only work with them to embrace and leverage the culture, learn on mini focus groups from the marketing perspective from them, but at the same time, we are making them active volunteers in our corporate philanthropy efforts in alignment with what is needed from the equity point of view.
Thank you so very much. So that leads me to a very difficult thing that is sometimes hard to do. So what do you see as the opportunities and also possible challenges that would be related to measuring your impact with corporate social responsibility strategies that align with your diversity, equity, and inclusion objectives? Celeste, we'll start with you. I'm going to give you a mathematical hard question.
I know. Let me get my little notepad. No, I think, luckily there are smarter people that have to make that determination than me, right? Like I don't have to figure that one out. But this is the kind of thing that academics really are going to be the ones that are going to start to feed us the information as to what is a measurable and attainable goal. Because as corporations, we're really good at saying like, oh, we got to hit this mark, right? And then for whatever, then we're like, oh, why didn't we reach it? Oh, we forgot X, Y, and Z, right? So I think this is a great opportunity for academics to step in and really provide direction for us as to the whole ecosystem, as to how it comes together. This is a complex place where we can't just arbitrarily say we are going to make X amount of widgets. This has a social component. It's got an employee component and a stakeholder. It's very, very complex. So it's in our best interest as corporations, as leaders of the business, to look to those that are diving into like the analysis of what all the different components of this, and can tell us this is an important measurement item for you to strive to achieve. And it's organizations such as ACER that would be at the forefront of those conversations to say, we are going to start measuring this, and in order for you to be evaluated on what value you bring to your DEI. And I'm going to take a point of privilege to answer one of my friend's questions. So Javen is watching. Yeah, Javen. And he said, how has the conversation changed in the last few years when you have these conversations? And I'm just going to quickly say, they've gotten easier, believe it or not. I know that the topics have gotten more difficult, but the conversations have gotten easier because they become conversations that we're having in all areas of life. So I don't have to start from the ground up as to the importance or the value that these communities bring. I can then say, we are all in agreement that this is important. And then I can move it up from there. So I think it's made it easier for me to have these conversations and to be able to advocate for the community. So thanks for the questions, Javen.
Yeah, and to tap into that, hi, Javen. Thank you for watching. We still have to build the business case, but the key is also, we need to remember, and this goes with measurements, how we're going to measure, right? What type of metrics, let's be sure that we're connecting. I love, what Celeste said about the engaging the academics, but we need to sell this in a way where community engagement builds equity. If we build equity, we build a stronger world and stronger communities. If that happens, we are going to have the opportunity to build a stronger brand, product, or service. And that's going to drive progress. It's going to drive social impact, value, business value, and revenue. So how we connect all of that is through the impact, right? We have been trying to come up with some very innovative type of measurement that for every dollar that we invest, we're targeting that $5 comes back to the community in terms of ROI. But it's very hard. And sometimes, to be honest with you, and I know that there are some probably marketing colleagues here. I was in marketing at one point of my career. In marketing, they're very driven in sales. Okay, well, we need this return on investment for every dollar that we put out there. But it's the same thing in the corporate philanthropy and an equity point of view. Yeah, it's harder to measure. But I always bounce back the question back to the marketing and sales teams. Like, okay, well, you tell me how many F-150 you were able to solve after you invested $10 million in that ad on TV. They cannot answer that question. They can estimate it. Well, let's be creative, innovate, and estimate too the impact and the value of equity and CSR.
It's a great question. We don't have enough time to really explore it, but I think Joe hit on it. You've got the societal impact that you can make, and then you've got we have, as working for corporations, a responsibility to show the impact on the corporation, the positive impact for the corporation as well. We've got an analytics team that we're putting together as part of our DE&I effort, to help us do that. Internally, you can measure things a lot easier than you can externally. So I challenge all of us and the folks watching, if you have ideas, suggestions in terms of metrics that can be used in the DEI space, let us know, because that is an area I think that we're all still exploring. And groups like ACER can take a lead in saying, well, these are metrics that we consider important, and that can help drive the conversation and the focus onto those particular metrics.
Absolutely, Ruben. And I would urge everyone to visit acer.org because they do have a report where they survey the companies that participate, and they are looking to see how they are doing on corporate social responsibility as well as philanthropic efforts. So it could possibly be used as a baseline to see what that looks like. So definitely visit acer.org if you've not ever been to their website to be able to draw down that latest report and see how your favorite companies are doing as it relates to this wonderful topic that we're having today. I'm having a little difficulty reading some of the questions, so I'm going to ask some of the ACER team members if they might share perhaps a couple of questions that have come through on the chat, so that we have a little more time and we'll be able to answer some from the audience.
I took some notes. I think Patsy asked about job seekers and DEI. So I sort of touched upon that. I think it is a priority. I think as people start to look for jobs, this is going to be a component. But again, this is a personal choice. To some people, it may not be a priority, at least not at first. It becomes a hierarchy of needs, right? So if we need a job, sometimes that's the only job that we can get. We may not get so particular around the DEI, but we certainly will make decisions in the long run, meaning you may do a stopgap decision right now, but that doesn't mean that you will stay with them and be committed to the values, because I think we all align to the values of the organizations we work with.
I agree.
Any other questions that are pressing that we need to get to?
I have a question. How did Javed become part of the panel? I saw his name last year, but I shouldn't be surprised. Hey, Javed.
He's a professional.
The additional panelist.
If we did not get to all of your questions, we apologize, but we do hope that you will participate in ACER Symposium and continue this great conversation that our three wonderful panelists have started, because you will have an opportunity to meet up with many other representatives from companies across the United States. Again, I would like to thank Joe Avila for being here today, Celeste Carrasco, and Ruben Barales. I pronounced it correctly this time. I apologize, Ruben, earlier in the session. You all have a wealth of knowledge and experience, and we so appreciate you sharing all of that with us today. On behalf of ACER and ACER's board, thank you so very much for being here, and for our attendees, we're so grateful for your presence as well. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you, Sandy, and thank you, panelists. Sandy, thank you in particular for moderating this conversation, bringing up such important points, and I would be remiss to not mention the much appreciated shout out of our Corporate Inclusion Index at ACER. You are absolutely correct. It is a critical tool for holding corporations accountable, but it's a tool that we use in partnership, and that our partners who take our Corporate Inclusion Index survey and participate in that partnership really rely on to capture the data that they use to make progress. I'd also like to give a special thanks to our panelists for such an engaging conversation. Celeste, Joe, Ruben, thank you for joining our panel and for sharing your perspective. In particular, thank you for centering equity into this conversation, for really emphasizing how equity is at the center of how your respective companies are aligning these strategic priorities, both DE&I and philanthropy co-investments in the communities in which you are a part. I'd also like to thank our viewers. What incredible engagement. We appreciate everybody who took the time to join us today across our social media platforms. And before signing off, I'd like to encourage everybody to visit ACER's website, where you'll find out more information about our upcoming programs and events at acer.org. A particular note, I would like to mention that our 2022 Hacer's Young Hispanic Corporate Achievers Program is now open for nominations. This application is for a competitive leadership advancement program, and for which we're hosting an informational webinar this coming Monday on the 26th. If you're interested, whether individual or company, in learning more, please join us for this informational webinar. And you can also, there's more information on our website as well. Lastly, I'd like to mention, as Sandy did, thank you for that, is that we are also opening our registration. It is open for our annual symposium conference. This is our 29th annual conference, a major component of convening some of the most diverse practitioners, thought leaders, allies in the DE&I movement around Hispanic inclusion. We elevate during this convening the power of Hispanic inclusion across all of these audiences. You will not want to miss it. Thank you so much, and we hope you will register for that on our website. We will see you again soon. Take care.